Oh shit. I don't know how y'all doing this Friday evening. But god dang it, I'm doing just fine. Uh, I'm doing just fine. Uh, I'm doing just I'm doing just I'm doing just fine. Y'all know y'all when y'all see this couch, y'all know I'm coming through. Y'all know I'm coming through. And I'm sitting on a pillow. Let me scoot it back some. Y'all know I'm coming through. You know I'm coming through with the laptop and the bucket hat and the microphone, baby. Y'all know I'm coming through. And the blanket, cause it's cold. It's getting too close to that winter season. If you're in Kansas City, whether it's Kansas City, Missouri, Kansas City, Kansas, baby, you know it's getting close to our winter season. So you best to get you a blanket, a cup of coffee, cocoa, creamy puff, latte, tea, and some tea or whatever you're drinking. And get you some popcorn, baby. Because if you're tuning in, you're tuning in to a movie break. You see, this YouTube stuff is difficult. I'm gonna be honest with you. It's difficult. And at any other time, I probably would have been and gave up. Not gonna lie. But I'm having fun with the Movie Break podcast. I'm having fun, god darn it. I'm gonna try my best not to curse this episode, but I got a potty mouth. So, for every curse word to come out my ooh, you almost got me. Every curse word to every curse word to come out of my mouth is a guaranteed episode. Cause god damn it, I knew it was gonna come one way or another. I'm gonna curse. I know I am. So you know you're gonna get an episode no matter what. Um Now, y'all, you might have seen a flash of the past 11 episodes I've done. At least the pictures of the name or what have you, whatever you might have saw if you was paying attention. If you wasn't, rewind it back and watch it again if you need to. But it's not all that important. You can just easily go to the playlist and watch it. You know, that's something you can do. You can just click on the playlist and watch episode 1 through 11. Or matter of fact, how about episode 1 through 12? Because this is episode 12. God dog it. We at episode 12. Damn. Episode 12, huh? And sooner or later, I'm going to forget these numbers if I don't put them down. I'm going to start to put these numbers down. Oh, here. Now, on episode 11, I did, and this episode, I'm not going to give a movie trivia. I'm just going to give you the answers from um episode 11 when I gave you the questions. And I'm about to repeat the questions in a second, but I'm not going to do a trivia on this episode. I'm probably going to do a trivia every 5 episodes, and then find something random to do or a random question to ask and see who watched the whole episode eventually. I'm gonna find something. I gotta find what works and fits with my movie break podcast. But baby, we here. Episode 12. Round of applause. Now, before I get into what today's episode is about, and you probably already guessed it if you read the caption, you probably already know what today's episode is about. But before we do get into that, I do want to go over the answers to the movie trivia from episode 11. Uh, Now, episode 11, I asked you name 5 movies Tyler Perry acted in that he did not write or direct. The 5 movies were Alex Cross, Gone Girl, Paw Patrol the movie, Vice, and Don't Look Up. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've only seen one of these movies and only heard of 2 of these movies, which was Alex Cross and Paw Patrol the movie. I've seen Alex Cross, of course. I've never seen or heard of Gone Girl, Vice, or Don't Look Up. And I had to look these up and make sure he actually was physically in these movies. And when you look up his name, it pops these movies up and it says these are the movies he was in. I never watched them to see what his role was or whatever. So now I know I got some more movies I can go back and watch. Um, but yeah, if you go look him up and you click on the movies, it'll tell you uh who he was, what he, what his character's name was and everything. But some of these movies I never even heard of. Didn't even know he was in. Um, yeah, interesting stuff that you find out when you get to googling things. The second question was, what was Jamie Foxx's first movie and the year? It was Toys in 1992. That was the answer. Question number three was, what movie did Kevin Bacon play a revengeful father and goes to war with a gang by his complete self? The answer to that was Death Sentence. And I'm going to do a movie break on that one pretty soon because that movie was raw. Death Sentence was raw. I'm sorry. I'm going to eventually do movies that were rated trash or that I think is trash. And I'm going to tell you why I think they're trash. But right now I'm on a spree of good movies. I'm sorry. I love me a good movie. Um, then the next question, number four, was what date did Ray the movie come out? So if you don't know, Jamie Foxx played in Ray, which is a movie, autobiography, not auto, a biography. I forget what it's called in the movie world. My brain's going crazy, but it's a movie biography about Ray Charles. If you don't know who that is, shame on you. Look him up. But the movie Ray came out on October 29th, 2004. I was going to change and take this question out because I realized that it came out on October. It came out October 29th, and I was going to wait till its movie anniversary to ask that question and answer it. But oh well, you got it early. Then question number five. Name two movies / short films that Snoop Dogg and Master P starred in. It was Got the Hookup and The Game of Life. I've never seen The Game of Life. It's like a 30-40 minute mini series is really what it is. Um but yeah, those were your answers for the questions that was asked on episode 11. Once again, if you haven't seen episode 11 or any other episode, please feel free to go back and rewatch it and tell a friend to watch a friend, watch another friend, watch that episode and tell me what you think. But today's episode, we're gonna get right into it. This movie, woo. I've seen this movie as a child. I actually watched it with my grandmother when I was, I want to say maybe 10 or so. I might have been a little bit younger. I don't really remember, but I know I watched it with my grandmother the first time I've ever seen it. It came out in 1996. The movie is literally a year younger than me. It's 28 years old. The movie is about an hour and 41 minutes long. It stars people such as uh, Jenny Malone, who played Ruth Ann, which in the movie her nickname is Bone. It also starred and Bone was played by Kelsey Elizabeth Bowler at the age of 4 in the movie because it did show Bone at his newborn and 4. Um, that's who played her when she was itty bitty. Um, and then Jennifer Jason Lee played Annie Boatwright. Michael Rooker played Uncle Earl. Uh, Grace Zabriskie played Granny. Uh, Dermot Mallory played Lyle Pearson. Glenn Headley played Ruth. Um, Diana Scarwood played Aunt Raylene. Um, Lindley Mayer played Reese, and Ron Eldord played Glenn Waddell. If you haven't guessed by now what movie I'm talking about based on the character listing I just gave you and ran down, we're talking about Bastard Out of Carolina. If you have not seen this movie as an adult or at all, I'm gonna fair warn you, it's a hard movie to watch. There's some parts in this movie that are hard to watch, but it's reality. It's things that really have happened in this world to young people, young men, young women, and yeah, I would say it's a hard movie to watch. It's a hard pill to swallow. But Bastard Out of Carolina, basically is about a mother named Annie Boatwright, who is a poor single mother from the rural South area. Bastard Out of Carolina is basically about a woman named Annie, a Boatwright, a poor single mother from the rural South Carolina, Greensville, Carolina to be exact. Struggles to raise her young daughter Bone, and she has more than one daughter. Bone and Reese is her two daughters, but Bone is the focal point of the movie. Um, they seem to find happiness when Annie marries a kind man named Lyle Pearson, who treats Bone like his own, loves Bone, and gives her the world. Well, however, later on in the movie, you find out that Lyle ends up dying in a car accident, which leaves Bone and Lyle's unborn daughter Reese and Annie by themselves, and they end up right back at home with Annie's mother, Granny. Um, Eventually, Annie later on in the movie finds another man to marry who eh, ends up being very abusive to Bone in several different ways: physical, mental, verbal, and physically. Um, physically, if you haven't caught on. And what I'm gonna do from this point, I want to give you that quick little recap of what the movie's premise is about. But I'm gonna give you a visual. So if you don't want to watch the movie, you can kind of get an idea what it's about, just in case you just feel like you can't stomach watching or seeing these things. I've already gave you the character listings. There are several many other actresses and actors in this film. Those 9 people I did feel, or 10 people technically. I just don't have a picture of Miss Kelsey Elizabeth Bauer, but those people I did feel the need to at least state their names for you. And once again, I'm gonna run down it one more time for you. Ruth Ann, aka Bone, played by Jenny Malone. Annie Boatwright, played by Jennifer Jason Lee. Uncle Earl, played by Michael Rooker. Granny, played by Grace Zabriskie. Lyle Pearson's played by Demort Maroney. I don't know how to pronounce his man name. I'm sorry. I tried to look it up and I still didn't understand how to pronounce it. And then Aunt Ruth, played by Glenn Hidley. Aunt Raylene, played by Diana Scarwood. And Reese, played by Lindley Mayer. And Glenn Waddell, played by Ron Elder. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. I don't know. Didn't like him in the movie, so I don't really give a damn. Anyway, all of these people have played in several other films. If you look them up, I know the pictures that you see probably you're not too sure who they are, but if you look them up and look at their movie credits that they were given, you'll be like, oh, that's such and such. That's such and such. Like for example, Mr. Michael Rooker. He was in the Marvel films. He played the blue guy, the one who did the whistle thing. If you're a Marvel person, you know who I'm talking about. I just can't think of his name right now. He's played in countless other films and TV shows as well. Janae Malone, she's played in other films and things of that nature that you might have heard of. And then Ron Elder, he's played in quite a few different films. If I'm not mistaken, he played in a movie with Will Smith. If I'm not mistaken, I just can't think of the name of it at this time. Um, but anyway, let's get into it. Okay, so the movie opens up with Annie, Uncle Earl, I believe maybe Aunt Raylene, Aunt Ruth, and one of the uncles, Uncle Timothy, I think, um, and maybe even Wade. They were all in the car driving, drinking, smoking, except for Annie. Annie was asleep because she was pregnant. They were all driving, and Uncle Timothy hits the back of a truck, and uh, Annie flies out, pregnant at all, flies out the vehicle, but she's fine, baby's fine. She gives birth to Bone, and um, she since she flew out of a car, she had a concussion, so she was on bed rest basically. Well, while she was in bed rest, that left Aunt Ruth and Granny, because they were the only ones who really had enough intelligence on how to spell and speak properly, I guess. It left them to try to come up with a name for our main character Bone, which Bone ended up with the name Ruth Ann. And she got the name Ruth Ann because they named her after her Aunt Ruth and her mother, Annie. That's where the name came from. But because they could not remember Bone's father's last name, she got stamped with illegitimate on her birth certificate. And I don't know if they really did that back in the day. I wouldn't be able to tell you because my birth certificate definitely don't say illegitimate. So I don't know what they did back in the day, but also my mother knows who my father is. But I'm not saying that in the movie that Bones' mother knew who her father was, and so did the rest of the family. They just didn't know his last name. So I don't know if this movie was supposed to be set back in like the 70s or 80s because it didn't say how far back the movie was supposed to be set and what time because I was born in 95. So ain't no way you telling me that that's what they was doing on birth certificates back in the day if you didn't know the daddy's last name. And if they were, they grind me for that. But anyway, back on track I go. So like I said, that ended up what happening with Bone. That's why it's called Bastard out of Carolina because she was stamped illegitimate, which back in the day meant you were a bastard. Nobody knew your daddy. Um, well, fast forward, Annie, um, ends up finding another man and falling in love with him, which is Mr. Lyle. I think it's Lyle. Is how you pronounce his name. She ends up falling in love with him and um you know, feeling like that's the man. And he falls in love with her. They get married, and she ends up pregnant with his baby. And they live in this whole happy fantasy life. Well, life strikes the hell out of Annie because unfortunately, Lau has a car accident. It was raining, and he ends up having a car accident. Car flips over, and he dies. He's ejected from the vehicle, and he dies. The scene though, it kind of can. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of was like, how did he die from that? But at the same time, people are dying from car wrecks that are just regular fender benders as well. So it made sense. But the way they did the scene, the way they did Annie's scene, you would have thought Annie would have died, versus how they did Lyle's scene. But anyway, I digress. So um Annie does go through this little trial of trying to get illegitimate removed off of Bones thing because she just did not want her daughter labeled as a bastard. That's the last thing she wanted. So she goes through these things to try to, get it removed. Doesn't really get any success. Well, Annie's working at like this little diner as a waitress or what have you, and her brother Earl brings this gentleman Glenn in, and Earl thinking Glenn's a good guy is what he's thinking. He's a good guy, so basically brings Glenn in to meet Annie, and Annie isn't impressed by him at first, and um she plays a little hardball, but then eventually she kind of caves in. And to me, Annie caved in because she just didn't want to be lonely. She just wanted to have a man. She felt like she needed a man to be complete, and she needed a man to take that illegitimate status off of her daughter Bone. Is what it seemed like to me. So fast forward. Let me go back real quick. When Lyle died, his mother automatically blamed Annie for it, right? And at that point, she basically disowned her own grandchild, Lyle's daughter. Like she didn't even because if I feel like had they been more present and actually cared and tried to help Annie with with Lyle's daughter, they wouldn't have been so far off. But they didn't even care. They had money and they didn't even care. They just was like, that's on you. Your bastard child and my grandchild is your problem, not my problem. That's basically how Lyle's mama treated Annie. But anyway, not Annie, but Bone has cousins, of course, and her cousins was trying to tease her, telling her that Lyle wasn't her daddy, she's a bastard, blah 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 blah. So this how I knew Bone was gonna be tough, cause Bone shot their little asses back with dang man, that's the second or third time I've cussed. So it's a guaranteed 3 or 4 episodes right there. But anyway, Bone starts telling this little horrific story about how they got kidnapped and was going to get eaten. Like so she's giving because she like y'all not gonna try to break my little self esteem. I'm gonna break y'all's. You know what I'm saying? That's how I knew she was gonna be a tough girl. Well, like I said, moving back forward, Earl introduced Glenn to Annie, and they hit it off, right? Like not right away, but they eventually did. Um, Glenn knows. Excuse me. Earl knows Glenn from the mill. That's where they met. They worked together at the mill, basically. So, like I said, they start spending time together. They eventually hit it off, and she becomes smitten by Glenn. Basically, that's what they say back in the day. Smitten. She got smitten by Glenn, and um, instantly, Bone didn't like him. She didn't trust him. She knew something was off about him, his vibe, his energy, something was off about him. And I believe it had something to do with her being able to tell the difference between how Glenn was and how Lyle was. And her relationship with Lyle was way different than Glenn because she trusted Lyle. She loved Lyle. Like she looked at him as a father figure because he showered her with nothing but love. Whatever energy Glenn brought towards Bone, she did not like it. She could feel it from the jump. Something was off about Glenn. And um the in the movie, Annie tries to go get Bones' birth certificate updated and tries to, basically be like, I was unconscious, blah blah blah. Trying to tell this whole story so she can update Bones' birth certificate, and they like, girl, bye. And instead of it saying illegitimate, it said uncertified at that point now. So Glenn and Earl, allegedly, it was never said in the movie that this happened, but I believe allegedly they set that building on fire. Before setting it on fire, they took Bones' birth certificate out of there and they let Annie set it on fire, signaling basically like the birth certificate is gone, no proof that she was illegitimate or anything of that nature. It's basically what she ends up, what they end up wanting to do. A lot of people's birth certificate, of course, gets burned up as well. Not just even their daughter, not even just her daughter, but a bunch of other people's kids and stuff, and the people's family in general. Shit get burned up all over one kid. When you could have just kidnapped her, when you could have not kidnapped, but you could have just stole her birth certificate and burned it up. Made no, I'm whatever. I digress. That part threw me off. Well, the more time Annie's spending with Glenn, Annie's mother, Granny, because they never really called her nothing other than Granny or Ma, she she does express how she don't trust something about Glenn. A lot of them eventually started telling Annie that they didn't trust Glenn, they didn't like him, something about him was off, and they couldn't vibe with him, like they didn't trust him. Well, Annie being so smitten and in love with Glenn and believing he really truly loved her, she's ignoring all the red flags. She's ignoring all the signs. Everybody in your family can't stand this dude. Everybody, including your daughter, she can't stand this dude. Like, come on, man. So, um, Glenn takes the girls on a date. And by the girls, I mean Reese, Bone, and Annie. He takes them on a date, get some food or whatever. And he's so weird. Like, dude trying to force the girls to call him daddy and, telling them that they gotta call him daddy because he love their mom and he love them and he gonna be their daddy. Like, just once again, red flags, creepy man stuff, man. He being a creep. And Annie just, oh, he just loves us. Just he's a fucking creep, is what he is. He's a creep. But Annie's smitten by him. Bone ain't putting up with this foolishness. She don't trust Buddy, so she never once willingly called that man daddy to his face. Never once, okay? And he eventually, while they're in the car, he asks Annie to marry him. And Annie being so dumbfounded and in love and just so eager to have somebody to take care of her, because that's what it was. Annie didn't want to work. Annie wanted to be a housewife. She wanted to be a kept woman. She didn't want to work. She wanted a man to take care of the household while she raised the kids. And because that's what Glenn promised her, she fell for it. She ended up getting pregnant by him. So he asked her to marry him. She marries him, and before she says yes to marry him, and before she marries him, she asks Bone, like, do you think I'm making a bad decision? And against Bone's better judgment, she just tells her she don't know. When she should have told her, Mama, hell yeah, you making a mistake. Don't marry this man. I can't stand him. And I think Annie was looking for Bone to tell her that. And I feel like if Bone would have told her that, she probably wouldn't have married him. But because Bone just said, I don't know, it just left Annie well, I don't know either, but I guess I'm gonna just marry him anyway attitude, you know. And um in the beginning of the movie when Annie's first husband, when he died in a car wreck, I remember Ruth told Annie that she now has that boat right look, which to me I guess means like the look of depression, the look of sadness, the look of defeat. I'm guessing that maybe the hard life look, I guess, is what she was trying to say. And I believe Annie just didn't want to have that look. She wanted to be happy. So she just assumed Glenn loved her so much that it made her look happy, is what she assumed, I guess. And um when Annie told Glenn yes, she'll marry him, like I said, she ended up being pregnant during that time. She ends up marrying Glenn and everything. And during her pregnancy, she was smoking. Glenn was letting her smoke. Like, that's another red flag. Like, what? Come on. He letting her smoke. He letting her do all this stuff or whatever. And she goes in to labor with the baby. Now, while she's in the hospital giving birth, instead of Glenn being in there with her, he's outside in the car with the girls, Reese and Bone. And during this scene, this is when it's about to start getting hard to watch, y'all. This is when y'all about to be like, ooh, cringe, sadness. This part bothers me. It bothers me a lot because I really, truly, 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 I hate blaming Annie, but I'm gonna blame Annie. Um, Annie goes into labor with her and Glenn's baby. And all Glenn kept talking about was having a little boy. He wanted a little boy, wanted a little boy. And God works in mysterious ways. He really does. And he don't reward the evil. This is for sure. And I know a lot of people be like, yes, he do. No, he don't. He don't reward the evil. Well, while Annie's in labor, fighting to bring world into this life, life into this world. My bad, I said that backwards. Life into this world. Oh, creepy Chester. Glenn, once again, like I said, was in the car with the girls. And Glenn tells Bone to get up front. And he's rubbing on Bone's head, rubbing through her hair, talking to Bone, and, you know, trying to, I guess you could say, connect with Bone. And while she's in labor giving birth, this creep is outside essaying his stepdaughter in the front seat and in front of people. Anybody could have walked by and saw it. It was nighttime, but anybody could have walked by and seen him essaying his stepdaughter. He didn't care. Didn't care one bit. Little sister in the back seat and everything. This weirdo didn't care one bit. And I don't cry at movies. I'm gonna make that clear. I don't cry at movies because I understand they're movies. But that one, that there didn't. It just lit a fire in me. A fire in me. Cause in my mind, the first thing I thought was, boy, I wish a mother would do any of my babies like that. That's the first thing that came to mind. Well, um, after that happens, the next morning, Glenn finds out that he and Annie's baby dies. And he gets in the car crying, devastated, tells the girls basically their sibling is dead, and um mommy's fine, but the baby's gone. And he finds out it was a boy. Remember, I told you, God don't reward the evil. And I know it sounds harsh to say it that way. Like, what you mean? Why would God? In a, it's so cruel to say it like this, but all he wanted was a little boy, and that's what she gave birth to, was a boy, and he got a little boy, but he didn't get to take him home. And it's sad to say, but at the same time, he probably would have did his son the same way, or did his son the same way he feel like his daddy did him. Because see, Glenn got daddy issues. That's why he's so jacked up in the head. He got daddy issues with his weird self. That's why they say that daddy issue stuff, it don't just stem for girls. It's for boys too. Boys can have daddy issues that can make them act like weirdos like that too. And anyway, before I get aggravated about that again, uh after they have a funeral for the baby, Glenn ends up moving um Annie and the girls away from the family. He takes them cross town basically and gets them, moves them, separates them from the family. And he does this so he can start doing what he wants to do to Annie and Bone without any interference, basically. He can't be the man he really wants to be with them, with her family around, because he knows the repercussions, the consequences for his actions. Well, um, at this point, he kind of basically he starts beating on Annie. Hold on, this light is really bright, and it's just like terrorizing my eyes. Sorry. Back to what I was saying. Anyway, say he moves him far away. He's still trying to force Bone to call him daddy, but Bone just wasn't having it. Bone like, nah, bro, you're not my daddy, bro. You a weirdo, especially after what you did to me. Well, um, like I said, Glenn can't keep a job. He kept losing jobs. He kept getting fired. He couldn't hold nothing down. Buddy was so wrapped up in trying to force this weird family I idea on Bone and stuff, that he even ripped up a picture that she had of her and Lyle, which was her first stepfather. He even rips it up because he's so jealous. Like, this dude is uh just obscenely jealous of a little girl, and it was weird. But like I said, Glenn is this can't get it right kid. He's his daddy's disappointment child, and he's so thirsty to get acceptance from his father that he's trying everything he can to look like a stand-up guy and like he got his shit together for his daddy. And it's not working. His daddy ain't going for it. His daddy looks at him as a disappointment anyway. Um, and his daddy ends up having like this little birthday party or some type of party for some reason. And um, Bone had went in there to get some tea, and he told her where to grab the tea out the table and go outside. Well, she tripped over something, and she dropped the tea and broke it. Right, she broke the glass, and his daddy gets upset, calls him these people basically, and Glenn like, this is my family, blah blah blah. He's whatever, and basically he gets into it a little bit with his daddy. Now he's holding a grudge against Bone because he had to stand up to his daddy because of what she did. So now he mad at her. So every little thing she doing at this point, now he wants to nitpick about. She was chasing her little sister around a car. She accidentally bumped him. Here he go getting an attitude, grabbing her up and saying stuff to her. He didn't hit her that time, but he grabbed her up and he said something to her. And she, doing what kids do, she mocked him. You ain't a race car. You a girl. She mocked him. He gets mad and he start chasing her, calling her little bees. He chasing her, and then he chases her upstairs, and then unfortunately he beats her. Okay, and Bone Bone's mama made me mad because when Glenn beat her like that, she didn't even really do nothing to protect her daughter. She ain't do nothing to protect her child. In my opinion, she didn't. She just let that man beat her daughter and then act like it was okay because that's her stepdaddy. Like, it blew me that she let that happen to her daughter. And then because he can't hold a job down and they moving around left and right, left and right. Um, they moving around left and right, left and right. Eventually, the mama had to get a job, right? Well, he had beat Bone so bad that he broke her ass bone, and Bone gets up and go. And the reason why I'm calling her Bone is so you know who I'm talking about, because her name is Ruth Ann. And I don't want to say Ruth Ann and y'all get confused, think I'm talking about the auntie and the mama, so I'm calling her by her nickname. Well, Bone ends up waking up in the middle of the night because she's in so much pain, and she limps into her mama room, and she wakes her mama up. She tell her, she's mama, and I'm about to show you the clip in a second, but She goes in there and tells her mama, and the mama takes her to the doctor, and the doctor basically says,
how'd you break her coccyx? Her what? Her tailbone, lady. Her ass. What do you mean?
and he threatens to call the police because he like, lady, your daughter being beaten, and if you ain't doing it, somebody else is doing it. And she gets him back in the car with Glenn, and she, because now she has come to the realization that he's beaten her daughter, and he broke her ass bone, and she want to get attitude with him and tell him, "Don't you dare!" But still take your daughter back home with him that same night. But I feel like she knew she couldn't trust Glenn, so she sent Bone to go live with her sister Ruth, and she's staying with Ruth because Ruth is sick. I believe Ruth might have had cancer, maybe, and they never disclosed what Ruth was sick with, but I'm assuming it was cancer because how sickly she just rapidly got. Um, and she goes and stays with Ruth for a little while, and while she's with Ruth, Ruth's daughter Dee Dee comes um back home because her daddy tells her that she got to come home and help take care of her mom, or he ain't gonna pay for that car no more. So she comes back home, and when she comes back home, um, Annie comes and picks Bone back up and brings Bone back home. Now they find out a few days later that Ruth had passed away. Um, oh, before Ruth died, actually, there's something very important that happened. Before Ruth died and before Annie came and picked Bone back up, Ruth had asked Bone, you know, um, is Glenn touching you down here? Is he doing anything to you? And Bone lied and told her no. But Ruth knew something was wrong. She knew something was wrong. So she ends up telling Bone that basically Glenn is still a little boy himself who's just jealous of your love and the love that your mama has for you. And um basically like don't pay him no mind. He's just jealous. That's all. He just wants your mama all to himself. And if you watch the movie, you'll hear exactly verbatim what she said to her. But that's basically what she said in a nutshell. Now, fast forward back to what I was talking about. Aunt Ruth ends up dying, and Glenn is back to his old ways. And I won't say exactly what led to him beating on Bone again, but after they found out Ruth died, Glenn ends up beating Bone again, real bad. He ends up beating, leaving welts and stuff and bruises, bad bruises on Bone's backside. And before he beat her, Bone was just at her wits' end with him. Okay, she had they was I think they was getting ready for the funeral. Bone had had enough of his antics. She like, you gonna beat me? Let's get it over with. Let's get this beating over with. She goes to the bathroom and she props her dress up like, go ahead, man, do what you gotta do. That's all you want to do is beat on me anyway. So let's just get it over with. And that's what he ends up doing. He ends up beating her. They end up going to the funeral and having a funeral, and then the families have to, have people do a repast. They have to repast, and Bone is just standing off by herself, not communicating with the fam. And her Uncle Earl, I think he noticed something was off about Bone, but instead of him just coming right on out and saying something, he just, call her over and, doing, doing what aunt and uncles would do. He give her a little bit of liquor, just a little bit of liquor. Tell her take a little swig for your aunt Ruth. She take a little swig, a little too many swigs, and she get a little tipsy. You know what I'm saying? Get a little drunk, and she stumbles her way to the bathroom, and she's sitting on the toilet. Well, Aunt Raylene comes in the bathroom, not knowing the Bone was in there, and she getting ready to fix her makeup, and she just so happened to look over and see Bone on the toilet. She like, "Oh, my bad, baby. I ain't mean to stumble in here in your business." She said, "Let me." She's, "Oh, Bone, you drunk?" Bone like, "I ain't drunk. I had a little." You know what I'm saying? Now you Raylene like, "Girl, please, but I done been there, seen that, done that before." And she goes to help Bone get up and put her panties back up. And before she did, she had seen um anyway, y'all didn't go too far. And anyway, she sees the bruises and everything on Bone. She sees the welts, the bruising, like she sees it. And she's screaming for Earl. And see, Glenn's issue is Glenn thought that nobody was gonna find out what he was doing to Bone. He thought he was gonna get away scot free. Well, see, when Aunt Raylene seen all them bruises, she knew who named the call. She called on good big brother Earl. See, Earl came through. Earl was like, "What's happening? What's happening?" They rush into the bathroom and they look and they like, "Oh hell no!" Like you did what? So you know what I'm saying? And oh boy, Uncle Earl, hold on, y'all. I'm gonna show you what Uncle Earl did. Let me show you. Let me shut up and show you what Uncle Earl did. Now I don't know how far in that clip it got for y'all. And if I cut it off too early, I'll know and I'll still play the rest of it above my head somewhere on the side of me somewhere, but I gotta continue rolling with the story. So as you got to see, Uncle Earl and them boys beat the brakes off of Glenn Tail. You know what I'm saying? They beat the brake skins off of that boy. And at this point, Bone ends up staying with Aunt Raylene because at at this point Aunt Raylene, Uncle Earl and them wasn't playing in no way. Bone wasn't going back with Annie. If Annie was going back with Glenn, they wasn't gonna let Bone go back no way. So Annie knew she ain't had no choice but to leave Bone with Aunt Raylene. See, if Aunt Ruth didn't die, I don't think Bone would have went with Raylene. She probably would have went with Ruth maybe, but maybe not. So um while Bone is with Aunt Raylene, Aunt Annie comes by and talks to her and not Aunt Annie, her mama Annie comes by and tries to talk to her and trying to convince her to come back home. And Bone like, Mama, I don't hate you, I love you, but I'm not coming back where that man is. Not after what he did to me. I can't. And see, Bone ain't told her mama everything Glenn has done to her. So her mama don't know about the SA and the other times he beat her like that. She know about the broken tailbone and the what got him beat up. She knew about those 2 times, and which is more than enough times to leave somebody alone. But I digress. I'll go into more how I feel in a little bit. But yeah, she wasn't doing that. She wasn't going back. Um, And what she does tell her mom is, I understand Glenn is good to you and to Reese, but he's no good for me. And I'm not going back around that man. Well, her mama's staying at Aunt Elma's because her Aunt Elma and Uncle Wade having some problems. And that was her excuse to stay. But really, I feel like she was actually trying to get away from Glenn and was using that as an scapegoat. But then she also told Glenn, which I don't know why she told Glenn, but she also told Glenn until she can get Bone to come back home, she's not coming back home. So somehow Glenn knew that Bone was still with Aunt Raylene. And Glenn ends up showing to Aunt Raylene's house to try to force and threaten Bone to come to back home with them so that he can get her mama back home because her mama ain't been home because her baby ain't been home. So mama and Reese been gone. And um basically Bone like, nah, bro, I told my mama she can go back home, but I'm not coming back. I don't like you. I don't trust you. Look what you did to me, bro. What's wrong with you? So this weird individual, he asked Bone to go get him some tea. So Bone going to go get him some tea and whatnot. And um while she went to go get him the tea, he's boom right in front of her. He takes the tea, he drinking it, and then hold on. Back to the episode. So where was I at? Oh, so he gets the threatening Bone and threatening to kill her and whatnot, cause she don't want to come back home. So he gets to threatening her, talking about somehow he gonna kill her if she don't come back home, because if she don't come back home, Annie ain't come back home and he can't have it. Um, and then at this point, this is where another tragic scene happens where, yeah, no. So he starts beating on Bone, smacking her, punching her, what have you, and he SA Bone again. At this point, this is when Annie walks in on what he's doing, and she hits him over the head with a glass of milk. And see, as a kid, that's the last part of that movie I remembered, was her hitting him over the head with the glass of milk. But it continues after that. She hits him on the head with a glass of milk. She ends up taking Bone to the hospital, but leaves Bone at the hospital with Aunt Raylene. This how grimy her mama is to me. You left your daughter at the hospital to go chase after this coward, this weirdo, because you still want to have a man in your life. It was mind blowing, mind blowing. But um, the police officer, trying to get Bone to tell him what happened. Bone just won't say. Everybody else knows what's going on and what's happening, but Bone just don't want to tell the officer what's going on. Well, shortly after they leave the hospital, maybe like a couple of days later, when Bone's kind of back healed, maybe in a week or so later, I guess. It doesn't really give a time frame how long later, but basically, Bone's mama ends up pulling up while Raylene and Bone and Earl are outside burning marshmallows, if you will, and she wants to talk to Bone. And Bone tells Raylene and Earl it's cool. I'll talk to my mama. We good. And as she's talking to Bone, she's apologizing to Bone, telling Bone that how much she loves her and how much she wished she would have known Glenn would have been like that. Because had she known, she wouldn't have been with him. Because she didn't think that Glenn would have treated her like that, and so forth and so forth. And in the end, she ends up giving Bone a birth certificate that says that she's certified or legitimate, basically. And that's really all she really wanted, was for her daughter to be a legitimate baby. And to me, you put your daughter through all that hell just to get her stamped as legitimate. And it blew my mind, because I'm like, bro, are you serious? You traded your daughter's well-being for a legitimate stamp on a birth certificate? Like her mama said, you gave birth to her. That's legitimate enough. I was with her mama when she said that to her. Ain't that proof enough? You gave birth to her, you know? And for some of my side notes, like one thing I noticed, like I said, the reason why it was called Bastard Out of Carolina, because she was an illegitimate child, because they couldn't put her daddy's name down, his first and last name down on a birth certificate, so she was stamped illegitimate. And what I was telling you guys earlier, when Ruth mentioned that she had that boat ride look on her face, I guess that was a look of misery. And no matter how much Annie tried to shake what Ruth told her and shake that look of misery, she still had it on her face, even though she had a man in her life. She still had that look on her face. She didn't look the same after losing Lyle. And when Annie sent Bone to go live with Ruth, I believe at that point she knew Glenn was doing something else to Bone. I think she knew it was more than just abuse, physical abuse. I think she knew it was uh SA abuse. I think that's what she knew. I think that at that point she started putting the pieces together, but she couldn't really prove it because Bone wouldn't say nothing. And in this film, like I mentioned earlier, Glenn does have daddy issues, which was forcing him to have that fatherly attitude with with Bone, and because Bone was rejecting him, he took it upon himself to feel like he had to do all that gross stuff to her to make her love him, and it didn't work. And he still kept doing sick stuff because I don't know if maybe that stuff happened to him as a kid, but he just did all this sick stuff because he felt like Bone gonna love me one way or another, and it was stomach wrenching. It was gross. Um, when Annie caught Glenn and she let that man live after that, she let that man not go to prison after that. I lost respect for her. I had already lost respect for her when she was letting me beat on her like that. Cause I'm gonna tell you right now, ain't no man alive gonna be able to beat me like that, and my mama not bust no door down and do what she gotta do. My mama gonna spend jail time behind her kids. She is not gonna let somebody beat us like that and still stay with them. Like, nah, not happening. I'm not gonna let somebody beat my kids like that and I stay with them. Man, that man would have had two in the head before he made it out that bathroom. You dig? Before he even made it in that bathroom to even do that to my child, he would have been the one getting beat with a belt. You know what I mean? Especially when your daughter ain't did nothing wrong. Like, man, Annie was too caught up in this love sick spell of wanting to be loved and wanting a man so bad, and it I don't know, man. Like I said, you put your daughter's life at risk over her stamp, over her birth certificate having a stamp of approval of legitimate instead of illegitimate. Who cares? You know what I mean? And that movie, man, it hurt to watch that because it hurt to see that little girl had to go through that. You know what I'm saying? Because you wanted to feel complete with a man. Sickening, bro. And I think the biggest life lesson that movie can give anyone, male or female, child or adult, is that if someone's treating you wrong, it's okay to speak up and tell the truth because there's somebody on your side. There's always somebody on your side. And it's never okay to put anyone through hell for your own personal gain. It's never okay. But I know I said I was gonna try to avoid bringing y'all sad stories or sad movies, but that was one of my not favorite movies, but one of my movies that definitely touched me, um, in a way to where I feel like people probably should see it at least once, so they can understand like that type of stuff is not okay, bro. It's not. So if you or anyone you know is going through something like that, it's okay to speak up. It is. It's very much so okay to speak up. Well, I want to thank everybody who tunes in every Friday and watches these episodes. This has been Tay with another movie break. And please, guys, if you're going through something like that, speak up and say something. Y'all be blessed. Stay safe.